So here's a question that's been quietly bothering Lion King fans for decades. Was Kiara really Simba's firstborn? Or did Disney just sweep a whole other cub under the rug? Because, believe it or not, Simba and Nala did have another kid, at least according to the books. His name was Copa. Cute little lion cub, curious nature, basically Pride Rock's version of the kid who always asks why 100 times a day. And yet, when you hit play on The Lion King 2, poof, gone, vanished. Not even a passing mention at family dinner, which makes you wonder what actually happened to Simba's son, and why is Disney acting like he never existed? Let's rewind to where all the confusion starts. The final scene of the first Lion King. Rafiki holds Nala and Simba's newborn, and everyone bows like they're at a Beyoncé concert. Now, back in '94, audiences walked out thinking, okay, cool, that's Simba's kid. Circle of life complete. When The Lion King 2 dropped years later, most people naturally assumed that Cub grew up to be Kiara. Easy connection, right? No, let me ruin your childhood teeny tiny bit. Disney later admitted that this cub didn't even have a name. Internally, the animators literally called it Fluffy. That's it. No gender, no identity. Just a placeholder baby lion so they could end the movie with the big symbolic bow to nature. Basically, that ending wasn't meant to set up a sequel at all. It was just a nice poetic way of saying life goes on. The problem? By the time the sequel came around, Fluffy magically morphed into Kiara, and fans who knew about Copa from the books were left staring at the screen like, wait a second, who's babysitting the other kid? If you only ever watch the movies, you probably think Kiara's the one and only cub. But dig a little deeper, like outside of Disney's main films, and you stumble across this little guy, Copa. He comes from The Lion King, 6 New Adventures, a book series that expanded the story not long after the original movie came out. And in those pages, Copa is officially introduced as Simba and Nala's firstborn son. So, who is he? Well, Copa is basically the definition of the curious cub. Always running off, always asking questions, the kind of kid who'd probably drive Zazu into early retirement. He's got a best friend named Afua, he gets into adventures, and he actually feels like a natural extension of Simba's story, the perfect heir to Pride Rock. The only problem? Disney never brought him into the films. The books were licensed by Disney, sure, but the movie creators had nothing to do with them. If I do the easy translation for you guys, technically, Copa doesn't exist in the official Lion King universe. He's like that distant cousin everyone swears is part of the family, but nobody has photos of. For fans, though, he became a big deal. Because if Copa really was Simba's first cub, then Kiara isn't the firstborn at all. Which means the whole royal family timeline suddenly doesn't add up. So if Copa was such a solid character in the books, why didn't we see him strutting around Pride Rock in The Lion King 2? Well, the short answer is Disney just didn't care. The team behind the sequel wasn't flipping through 6 New Adventures for inspiration. In fact, when asked about Copa, the director of Simba's Pride literally said he had no idea who that was. Instead, the sequel's writers wanted their own storyline, and that meant inventing Kiara as Simba's daughter. Simple as that. Kiara was a clean slate. Disney's logic was basically, hey, that cub at the end of the first movie? Forget about it. Here's Kiara. She's the heir now. And since the original cub was never meant to be anyone specific, just Fluffy, they didn't see it as breaking continuity. Of course, fans weren't buying it, because to anyone who did read the books, it looked like Disney had erased a character without explanation. One day, you're Simba's pride and joy. The next day, you're kicked out of the circle of life like you never existed. But if Disney won't tell us what happened to Copa, fans are more than happy to fill in the blanks. And some of these theories make Simba's Pride look like a full-on murder mystery. The most popular idea is that the cub we see at the end of the first Lion King really was Copa. Not Kiara, not Fluffy, but Simba's actual firstborn son. That would explain the different ceremonies, Rafiki lifting the cub in the first movie versus Nala carrying her daughter to him in the second. 2 different cubs, 2 different moments. Which begs the question, if that was Copa, where is he by the time Kiara comes around? This is where Zira enters the chat. A lot of fans believe she's the key to Copa's disappearance. Remember, Zira is Scar's most loyal follower, obsessed with revenge against Simba. So the theory goes that she targeted Copa, maybe even killed him as her twisted payback. That's why she gets banished. That's why her hatred burns so deep. And that's why Simba comes off so overprotective of Kiara later on. It's not just him being a helicopter parent, it's him trying not to lose another cub. Other fans take it a step further and say Zira straight up bragged about killing Copa. There's this one scene in Simba's Pride where Zira offers up little Kovu to Simba, almost like a peace deal. Some people think that wasn't about Scar at all. It was her taunting Simba about taking his son's life and daring him to retaliate. Pretty twisted if you read it that way. And then there's the subtler take. Maybe Copa didn't die, maybe he just ran off. A curious cub, a world bigger than the Pride Lands. It's not hard to imagine him wandering too far and never making it back. That theory keeps him alive, but it also keeps him conveniently out of the way for Disney's version of the story. At the end of the day, the theories all circle back to the same point. Kopa's absence feels deliberate, like the Pride Lands are hiding a secret, and Kiara only got her crown because her brother's story was erased. But the mystery doesn't really end with unanswered questions. The whispers about Copa's fate start to take on a life of their own, turning into something darker, almost like a story that was never meant to be told. And if you follow that trail, it leads straight into a version of events that feels less Disney fairy tale and more tragic legend. The story goes like this. Copa, being the curious little cub, wandered too far one day and ran into Vitani, Zira's daughter. Instead of enemies, the two actually became friends, and even Nuka, yes, scrappy, jealous Nuka, joined in on the games. For a while, it looked like there might be peace between the two sides. But of course, this is Zira we're talking about. And the second she found out her daughter was playing with Simba's heir, she didn't see friendship. She saw an opportunity for revenge. So in this fan version, Zira lured Copa in with kindness, gained his trust, and then turned on him in classic villain fashion. She attacked, blaming Simba for Scar's death, and left Copa's small body at the edge of the Outlands. Some versions of the story say he didn't survive. Others say he barely did, crawling away, wounded, deciding to disappear until he was old enough to fight back. Either way, when Simba realizes his son is gone, it shatters him, and suddenly his suffocating protectiveness over Kiara and Simba's pride makes a whole lot more sense. It's a grim fan theory, sure, but it ties a lot of threads together. So here's my million-dollar question. If Copa already existed in the books, why didn't Disney just use him for the sequel? Why go through the trouble of inventing Kiara from scratch? The answer actually makes sense once you think about what story they wanted to tell. First off, gender. A female cub gave the writers a completely different angle. Instead of repeating Simba's story, the son proving himself as king, they could explore something new. A daughter trying to balance her own independence with her father's expectations. Kiara's whole arc in Simba's Pride is about breaking out of Simba's shadow, proving she can handle danger, and choosing her own path. That storyline hits differently with a daughter than it would with another son. Second, romance. Let's be honest, the sequel is basically Romeo and Juliet with lions. For that setup to work, they needed Kiara as the princess and Kovu as the outsider. If Simba had a son as his heir, suddenly the love story gets tangled with issues of succession, masculinity, and basically Simba's kid trying to be king. Disney wanted a clean love story, not a political drama, and finally, the strength of the story. Copa's personality in the books is curious and adventurous, but not much else. He wasn't fleshed out in a way that could carry a full movie. Kiara, on the other hand, was designed from the ground up to fit the themes of the sequel. She's rebellious, headstrong, and most importantly, her struggles mirror Simba's while still being different enough to feel fresh. So Disney's choice wasn't really about erasing Copa as much as it was about reshaping the franchise. Kiara simply worked better for the story they wanted to tell. Still, that doesn't stop fans from asking the big what if. What if Simba's heir really had been Copa? And how different would The Lion King 2 have turned out? After all that, this is where the line gets drawn. What's canon and what's just fanon? Canon, according to Disney, is simple: the movies and the official shows like The Lion Guard. And in that version of the story, Kiara is absolutely the firstborn, no questions asked. That mystery cub at the end of the first movie? Just fluffy. No gender, no name, no secret backstory. End of story. But then there's Fandom the World fans built out of scraps, headcanons, and a whole lot of what if. And in that version, Copa is real. He's Simba's first son. He's the missing piece that explains Zira's rage, and he's the reason Simba never lets Kiara out of his sight. Honestly, their theories sometimes feel more satisfying than the neat little package Disney tied up with Simba's pride. At the end of the day, it comes down to what story you want to believe. Disney gave us the safe, polished answer. Fans gave us the messy, dramatic one. Which one do you believe? Well, that's up to you. Maybe you like the idea of Simba having a daughter who breaks free from his overprotective grip. Or maybe you prefer the version where Zira's revenge is way more personal and Simba's paranoia actually has some heartbreaking weight behind it.